to ask me to share what we have been working on here at Pantas and really how we have operationalized the transition to a greener economy using technology. I really am very honored to be able to speak and I'm very humbled actually to be able to share with such distinguished financial institutions. Before I start, people often ask me, Shaida, how did you transition from finance to now climate? That's a huge jump. But I think coming from a financial background, I think one quickly realizes the immense responsibility that we have as we really have a direct influence on how a company runs these businesses. So it is very fitting that the term ESG was coined after the report called Who Cares Win was published. Now, this report is the result of a joint effort of financial institutions, which were then invited by the UN Secretary General Kofi Annan to really develop guidelines, recommendations on how to better integrate environmental, social, and governance issues in asset management, securities brokerage services, and also associated research functions. So Pantas is very, very honored to be able to provide these ESG comprehensive solutions via our software. So again, just to introduce what we are, Pantas really provides an end-to-end climate solution to help large corporations and also SMEs measure, manage, and disclose their carbon emissions. Of course, at the very core of it all, we provide this via our software. We add value here really by deploying, when we talk about end-to-end, after the calculation, really helping them to set the targets, and most importantly, which I am most excited about, is to really help them to decarbonize. But before I go into that, I think I just want to touch base upon, since the topic here is the climate transition and also the technology that we are using to really disrupt this area here, is because at the very core of our software is really we provide an AI-powered platform. Now here, when you're talking about carbon accounting, carbon calculations, it's so daunting. So perhaps maybe before I start there, what is carbon accounting? Why is it very important? The way I like to share with my clients is think about your financial accounting. When you talk about and calculate your cash inflow and outflow, and when you talk about carbon accounting, is really the measurement calculation of the inflow and outflow of the carbon emissions that you use to run your operations, the fossil fuel that you emit into the air via the greenhouse gas emissions. So I think that's how we sort of explain to our clients what carbon accounting actually is. And here, in order to get that information on one's carbon inflow and outflow, how do we do that? How do we go about doing that? It really comes down and boils down to the data that resides within your company's operations. So here, I mean, there are many other, there are clients that have actually started the process before engaging us, but they have quickly come to realize that the data collection is a challenge, and therefore we were very happy to share that there is a solution to that. So using our platform, using the technology, you're really able to streamline the data collection process. So some of it here, people talk about API integration, making that seamless. But another discovery that we found in this part of the world, API integration, it really is not the norm, because a lot of this climate data resides outside of your ERP softwares. There's still, majority of it, I have to share, is done really manually. You can talk about collecting the data via Excel spreadsheets. Some of them even have physical documents. So, we're able to really streamline that process using technology and help them to calculate their carbon emissions. Then after you're talking about carbon accounting, the calculation, what really is next in this space? here in this climate space, data accuracy is very important. So we have also partnered up with assurance providers. In this case, we have a partnership with the British Standards Institution, really in helping us to assure our process. So I'm happy to share that the methodology, the software, the calculation that we use in our software really is assured under the ISO 14064-1. This really covers the assurance on carbon emissions. So the British Standards Institutions did that for us. So that really, assists people and assists our clients if they want to take a step further to get their reports assured and validated. So we have a partnership with that. And of course, here you're talking about, transitioning to a green economy. How do you go about to do that? We also have a financing partner, so AmBank. I will touch upon more in details when we start our slides. I know this is quite a lengthy introduction, but I just like to set the stage. So before we go about to talk about the solutions, the regulations. So I think perhaps we can start the slides to just really walk you through what I'll be covering during my presentation. So first and foremost, here I think we'll talk about how does carbon tracking, carbon calculation and reporting impact SMEs and supply chains. Secondly, how do regulations compel companies in the supply chain to decarbonize? The third item that I will be covering is really what solutions are available, as Alex mentioned, for corporations to meet these stringent climate regulations that continue to really pop up like mushrooms every day. And also, can technology allocate green capital efficiently to drive sustainability? And finally here, I think, of course, for today's audience, can investors leverage onto this ESG compliance for superior market returns? So I would like to say, here it will be a win-win-win for all parties involved. So I think without further ado, allow me to set the stage, set the context in terms of how carbon reporting works and the different scopes and how SMEs, the suppliers are affected by this whole entire movement. So next, please. So here, I like to set the stage here. Now, this chart is very important. When you talk about carbon accounting, you're talking about the three different scopes. I think, put it simply, there are three different scopes. The first scope here are really your direct emissions. You're talking about direct emissions. Imagine a company's vehicles that they own. So a company's owned vehicles that emit fossil fuel when you use to run those vehicles. Now, these fossil fuels will directly impact the carbon emissions into the atmosphere. So now these are considered scope 1. Scope 2 are your purchased electricity. I think it's rather simple. Majority of our clients are really able to just pass us their electricity bill. So there you go, the calculation here really is to apply an emissions factor to your electricity. And the thing here is, majority of the clients that we've approached has, actually started this process. They've started the process of calculating their scope 1 and 2. However, the beast here really lies in scope 3. So as you can see here, even this chart here, majority of it, 80% of a client's greenhouse gas emissions come from their scope 3, which is their indirect emissions. It comes from your upstream and also your downstream. So upstream can come really from the purchase of goods and services, your capital goods, the transportation to bring down the waste generated in your operations. Bursa's requirements also covers your business travel and your employee commuting. So there it starts to add up, right? There's 15 categories under scope 3. Your downstream on this other part here is really includes all of that, even the use of the sold products. So think about, scope 3 in a way, for example, like when you buy a computer, someone made that computer. And there are carbon emissions related to the operations of making that computer. So you can see how far it can go in the supply chain. So this here is to showcase how, when you talk about the carbon emissions reporting, how it touches and it starts to impact the SME and the suppliers in this case. So here it's just to really simplify how carbon reporting impacts SME suppliers. Also, not to forget, the final category within the scope 3 is financed emissions. So any financial institutions, banks, as you continue to offer financing, you must also take into account the finance emissions here under PCAF. So there are a lot here. I think right now the movement is, we're not only, banks or regulators are not just interested in a company or a financial institution reporting the scope 3. It's no longer sufficient. They want to see how you're able to now manage and start actively, proactively reducing the carbon emissions within your scope 3. So just here, I just set the stage on how carbon reporting works and how it impacts the supply chain. So next, please. I think here, this particular, it looks a little bit complicated, but here it just to showcase, simply the conclusion of this slide is that as long as your company sells to another company, your company's emissions will directly contribute to your company's scope 3 emissions. Now, this is how, again, as I said earlier, SME suppliers get impacted in the supply chain emissions of the world. So here you see, the emission cycle is really known as the cradle to gate emissions. It is attributed emissions, consist of the company's emissions that are related to the production and handling of the materials or goods. So this is, in conclusion, this is how it is and how it impacts the supplier. Next slide, please. Wow, all right. So the question here is, how do regulations compel companies in the supply chain to decarbonize? Now, the big question here is, who is asking these companies to report and why are they asking them to do it? Now, historically, this has been by and large a voluntary exercise. Companies have started this process. They want to understand, they want to do the math and understand what their carbon emissions are, their baseline. They want to find ways to reduce their emissions. And, in many cases, these companies, they report their carbon footprint to their stakeholders. They can be their investors, their clients. Some have also gone above and, to even start including that in their marketing, and previously, these were all done in acronyms, very voluntarily. I'm not sure, you might have heard or you might not have heard, organizations such as CDP, the Carbon Disclosure Project, or SBTI, Science-Based Targets Initiative. So these acronyms are voluntary reporting. Now, however, increasingly, companies are starting to get worried. They've come to us because they want to start the process because they are now required to disclose. Because some of the countries, this is the law of the land. The law of the land in the UK is that public listed companies must report their carbon emissions. You see that also in EU, in the US, SEC is starting to do the same. And here in Malaysia, Bursa has also required public listed companies on the main market and is to report their carbon emissions starting financial year end 2024. So here we can see that more and more clients, big companies coming to us because, they are aware. They are aware, they are concerned, they are proactively looking for solutions to assist them in these disclosures. So Alex asked, what are the solutions out there? There are technology providers. Here we have Pantas. We're able to assist our clients in getting them prepared for these regulations when they come into effect. I think here in Malaysia, we are very concerned because in October, CBAM will come into effect. Now, what is CBAM? CBAM here, as you see on the top far left, is the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism by the EU. And also, EU will also start the carbon border tax. Now, this will be phased in slowly over the course of 9 years, starting in 2026. But here in Malaysia, we are very concerned on CBAM. And this first wave will start in October. Second wave, I think in a couple of years, will be impacted there the most. Now here, any exporter to Europe will eventually be hit with this. And we need to start to comply because investors or customer requests will come through. You have frameworks such as ISSB, which now will also require them, again, as I mentioned earlier, not to just report, but also must show how they manage and reduce their scope 3 emissions, which means, what does it mean? All their suppliers will be impacted. So there must be a solution provided to these suppliers, because if the suppliers do not comply, they will be at risk of being cut off from the supply chain. I think for here, the suppliers, it's not like they do not care, but really, they are lacking the knowledge, the know-how, the tools to embark and start this journey. Especially when it comes to, abiding by frameworks. These are complex things and it can be very daunting for an SME. But they have no choice. They have no choice. They have to start reporting. They have to start looking into ways that they can start complying to these requirements. And of course, banks will also be required to track and report their customers' emissions. Again, as I mentioned earlier, under the finance emissions concept. So eventually, I think the summary here, the conclusion is that all businesses will need to start tracking, measuring, and also managing their carbon emissions. I think here, what we have learned over the course of our time in this space is that the climate talent or talent in this climate space is very limited. A lot of our clients that come to us, they have a sustainability team, but given the fact the operations is large, and you see earlier, as I mentioned, 80% of the emissions really comes from scope 3, and data is key here. You really need a large team to be able to go through that process. So here, I think tapping into technology that's provided is the only way to ensure the efficient, the accurate calculation of these carbon emissions. And also here, you will really save the compliance cost by using technology. An example of the shortage of talent in this space is, evident in, our neighboring country. The MAS, the Monetary Authority of Singapore's Chief Sustainability Officer, Dr. Darian, she actually started an outsourced Chief Sustainability Officer firm because of this fact that is lacking of the sustainability or climate technology talent out there. So it just shows that this demand for solutions, for technology to tackle this space is only going to grow from here. So I think here, just to show that, do not be afraid, do not be overwhelmed. It seems very daunting, it's an alphabet soup, so many things to comply with, but rest assured, there are solutions out there to assist you to navigate through this process. Next, please. So here, in order to tackle this process and this problem in terms of getting the suppliers ready when the requirements come into place, the Greening Value Chain Program was launched. Bank Negara was very concerned because they suspect, based on their study and research, that 80% of the SME suppliers in our country will be affected when CBAM comes into effect. Because as I said again, you only need to sell to someone that sells to EU, you will be affected by this upcoming regulations coming down the pipeline. So what is the Greening Value Chain Program? What is the objective of this program? It really is to assist getting our SME suppliers equipped with the knowledge, know-how, and getting them the assistance needed to implement impactful long-term change to green their operations. So this was launched at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt last year, and we are very happy to share that it was successfully rolled out in March of this year, along with our partner, the financing partner, AmBank. So how does this work? So these are some of the key highlights here of the GVC program. First and foremost is the simplified carbon accounting software. I think, for us, we really empathize with the SMEs. For them, on a day-to-day basis, they really are focused on just keeping their lights on, being able to pay the employees. Imagine getting a request from your buyers, because this is essentially what happened. I just want to share. One of the SME suppliers came up to us and say, "Hey, I had two large buyers come to me, really passing me just a paper, and I need to now start calculating my scope 1, 2, and 3. I really have no idea how to do this, and they gave me a deadline. If I fail to meet the deadline, I'm no longer able to supply to them." So imagine the thought process, that goes through an SME supplier, and I think that's why it is very important for us to provide them. We have the responsibility as financial institutions, as large corporates, to provide our SME suppliers with the tools. I mean, they are the heartbeat of our nation. We cannot afford to leave them behind. There has to be a just transition. There has to be a fair transition, especially for the smaller guys. They cannot be left behind in this process. And that is why this Greening Value Chain program has been a success for our SMEs. Of course, I think this second point actually should have been the first one, because awareness is key. In anything, if you're not aware, if you do not understand, you will not have the appreciation and know-how on why we are doing this in the first place. So that's why part of this Greening Value Chain program is the capacity building, is the technical training and advisory that we provide along with our technical partners as well. Part of the partners in this program is MGTC and also BSI. I think for us here also, after we have provided them the free software, using our time during the training, we're able to also teach them how to use this software. Now, this carbon accounting software is a simplified self-service software. We've gotten great feedback that it is very easy to use. The measurement and all the calculation is done automatically via the software, so they do not have to worry about the accuracy of the calculation. And also, once you've done that, what's next? I think, being in this climate space, understanding what needs to be done to move the needle, we have to know that it cannot stop at just the reporting. And again, as I mentioned earlier, when you're talking about the requirements of your scope 3, it doesn't stop at just the measurement. How do you then manage the scope 3? How do you assist your suppliers to start the process of decarbonizing? The decarbonization solution partners we have worked with via our software, we have started to add on one, I think, every few weeks now. They're able to provide smart suggestions for our SME suppliers that will make sense for them. And also, finally, in order to tap into the decarbonization solutions, you must need financing. So under the Greening Value Chain program, that's where you have the LCTF, which is the Low Carbon Transition Facility that is provided by Bank Negara via our partnered banks, such as MBank. And also, you now, as a financial institutions, have the tool to start issuing sustainability-linked loans to SMEs. I know that currently many banks have started these sustainability-linked loans for larger companies. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of large companies have started to calculate their scope 1 and 2. Some have also started, some categories of scope 3. But SMEs were not able to do this before. So can you imagine the large market financial institutions are now able to tap into, because you now have the tool to see that these SME suppliers are able to now disclose their carbon emissions, set targets, so we work very closely with our banking partner to come up with the metrics in terms of the target setting for the SMEs. And then via the software, you're able to see the progress in terms of how they're making in achieving their targets. With that, you're able to now issue sustainability-linked loans. So this is an ongoing journey that we're able to build together. I think we have amazing policy makers, because this really, it needs both a private and public partnership in order order to ensure that this program is a success. And we are very lucky to be in a country that has, both the policymakers, the regulators, and also the financial institutions really coming hand in hand to ensuring that we provide solutions to our suppliers. So we're very, very honored to be part of this program. So these are some of the highlights of how this program works. I think the next slide is really to share with you how it works operationally, how we have boots on the ground really operationalizing this program. And I'll just share with you some of what we have done with some of the clients at Pantas. Next slide, please. So this is the flow, the Greening Value Chain Program flow. What we have found is that in terms of the carbon disclosure, I think, earlier you have voluntary reporting under CDP and SBTI. That percentage of companies is super small. It's like less than 1%. When you really want to get people to get kick-started in this process, it really has to come from a top-down approach. Now, what do I mean by top-down approach? In this case, we work with an anchor company. So it can be any anchor company as an exporter. There has to be an urgent need for it to comply to regulations. So in this case, we have a Kosan. So for them, they were requested by their EU customer to start calculating and show how they are managing their supply chain emissions. So that's why here we have come up with a supply chain management program to get their suppliers to calculate their carbon emissions. So via the GVC program, again, as I mentioned earlier, Kosan's SME suppliers get training. So Bank Negara is our partner. So in this case, Bank Negara was kind enough to provide the facilities, the venue for the training program. So we have now conducted more than 3 training programs to over, I think right now we have the attendees for the program, I think more than 500 now that have now gone through the first cohort of this program. They now have access to the light software as well. So we engage with the SME suppliers. We really build the awareness, the capacity building. We provide the technical training via the software as well. And they've now started to report. And people ask questions. So hey, for these SME suppliers, it's really rare that they only supply to one company. So what if they are being requested to disclose to another buyer? We're saying that it is not a problem. With that same information, they can also provide that information to another buyer, because the data really belongs to them. And we really here, the goal again to remind you is to ensure that we get our SME suppliers really equipped with the information they need to remain in their supply chain. So this is here what we have done. And as I mentioned earlier, I think for us at Pantas, we are so excited that we're now able to also be part of their journey in the decarbonization, because we have, solution partners within the network, within Pantas network, that can provide, now that we are able to calculate your carbon emissions, we were able to identify the carbon intensity operations, and we are able to come up with solutions on how to best manage their carbon emissions within our software. We are able to now come up with a smart suggestion that is cost effective for them and has the highest impact in reducing the carbon emissions. So some of the partners here, we have SafeTruck, we have Guardian, and we have Gentayu. So we have solar panel providers, energy efficient providers, and also we have here waste management providers. So we are really committed in ensuring that it is an end-to-end solution here at Pantas. And of course, it will not be able to follow through if you do not have the access to financing. So here we want to ensure that the SMEs are not left behind. There is a just transition for them as well as they switch over to greener operations, to less carbon intensive operations. So here we can help them with the roadmap. So you're able to see over time how they're able to reduce the emissions, because this is also the core part of the software. I think previously when we were talking about to large clients, we thought we needed to really sell them on the idea of saving the planet, but they have already bought into that. They know how important it is. They know that the planet is heating up. It is so hot this year, and so they're sold. But what they are interested in is really learning where the carbon intensities area lies within the operations, how they can effectively reduce it, and what are the options for them? What are the greener financing? What are the transition-based financing? I can tell you that these companies have a competitive edge against their partners or against their competitors. So we are really here to provide them with that tool, with the knowledge, and I think here they're able to create new business opportunities by becoming more competitive. Just to share an example, Datai Hotel is one of our clients. So they are a luxury hotel under Khazanah's portfolio. So Datai has a very interesting goal. I think they have come ahead, really being in the space, and they wanted to be the first climate positive hotel in Southeast Asia. So what is climate positive? So what it means is that they want to showcase that they're able to suck in more carbon than they emit into the atmosphere. So we worked closely as well. So they had FRIM do the calculations in terms of the forests that they own, and were able to then calculate the carbon emissions from their operations, from across scope 1, 2, and also scope 3. And we're in the process in getting them started. Another hotel that we have successfully launched is in Thailand. So it's called Divana Hotels. So they've also successfully undergone the end-to-end carbon management with us. What we did was really to assist them in calculating their carbon emissions coming from their operations. We were able to identify the carbon intensity areas and provide suggestions. They use that data. With that data, they can turn it into action. They receive financing from K-Bank, which is our partner also in Thailand. And as of today, as I'm speaking, solar panels are being installed. So I think, for us, we're so excited to be able to see the direct impact and the change that we're able to make. And again, thanks to technology. So here, I think I would like to also share that, this success, because of this success, we have been invited yesterday. We just had a meeting with the Bank of Thailand. So they invited us to moderate their panel during their ESG conference in Thailand in September, because of the success of what we are doing here. So I think Pantas, we are very committed. We are, super excited to see this come true, and I'm very happy to, to assist more, passionate clients and financial institutions out there to embark on this journey. So thank you very much. I think I will stop my presentation here. I think we've met the 30 minutes, right, Alex?
Yeah, thank you so much, Shaida. Actually, we were hoping that you could give us a bit of demo on your software so that you could see how it operates. But never mind, we can send a link to those who are interested in your software, all right, for a more practical demonstration of how it works.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, great, wonderful. So we'll move on to the Q&A. We'll open up the floor for any questions. I'm sure there's many, and there's a number of top executives who are with us, especially from the AmBank side. Go ahead.
Alex, if I may start.
Yeah, please do.
Nordin here from AmBank. Now, Waalaikum Salam. Shaida, very good presentation, very broad. As I was listening to you, there have been a number of questions that came to my mind, especially when you started off your slides with how, and how. And I'm thinking about how do we do this? How do we do this? And Alex was right. I was just hoping that you go one step deeper into giving a more perhaps numerical example of how this is done. And Alex was suggesting a demo of some kind, which I think would be very, very helpful. Simply because we are entering a new territory where we are measuring something from our own company and from our supplier and from the supplier of the supplier, which involves information sharing from all these parties across the value chain, which can be very daunting, and at the same time encroach into privacy protection, etc. So I was just hoping that, as we go along, I know that we have limited time here, and perhaps I can follow up later with what Alex was suggesting about the measurement. Yeah, initially I thought measurement was in numerical terms, but when you mentioned about intensity, measuring the intensity of carbon emission, then I begin to realize that it could be for purposes of carbon emission calculation rather than reporting for purposes of disclosure, for example. I remember one of your slides about ISSB, IFSB. These are accounting institutions which will require measurement. Now, when you talk about measurement, therefore, you require numerical figures. At the same time, how you present it in the financial statement. And thirdly, how do you disclose it in the financial statement? But are all these covered under the so-called your services, number one? And are these areas expected to be covered by those people who are involved in this ESG exercise?
Absolutely. A fantastic question. Thank you very much, Mr. Nordin. I will be more than happy to walk you through a live demo, but it does take a while, so I do recommend that we schedule another session on that. But to answer your question, in terms of the how, and how, you rightly pointed, it is a numerical figure. So when you talk about the data, so the carbon accounting really is governed under the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. So I showed you earlier the scope 1, 2, and 3. Those are, those are the categories. However, when you talk about the final output, the final calculation will come out as a carbon account or carbon dioxide equivalent or greenhouse gas equivalent. It is a numerical number. Now, how do you calculate that? Really, when you talk about, let's say, a fuel, so you have fossil fuel used to run your company vehicle, as an example. So we take the liter of that, we multiply that with something called an emission factor. So this emission factor really varies based on location, based on geography. So the final output, it is a numerical figure. And really, it is all based on the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. So how does it now relate to your other part of the question in terms of the disclosures? So as an example, ISSB, yes, it is governed under IFRS, under the Financial Accounting Framework. Now, ISSB, they recently launched the S1 and S2. So now, what does it mean? Now, S2 really covers the climate-related disclosures. So under the climate-related disclosures, you must quantify your scope 1, your scope 2, and your scope 3. So now all these calculations are done via our software. It can be done manually. The problem here is when you are under the microscope, when you're doing it manually, the big challenge here is how accurate is it? Now, when you're talking about inaccurate data, that is when, you hear the term greenwashing comes about, the risk of the accusation of greenwashing. So that is why for us here, we really encourage to automate that process. There is a tool to automate the calculation of your scope 1, your scope 2, and your scope 3 using the software. I think that is what we encourage. And all this information will really be able to be listed down on all the frameworks that I mentioned earlier, right? Be it SBTI, CDP, TCFD alignment. TCFD is now under ISSB. So rest assured, all this information will be able to be showcased as required by those frameworks.
So this will be the solution that you're providing will be automated. I think that's wonderful, and I think that helps a lot in our exercise of trying to quote unquote comply with the requirements, the new requirements now. So that's very good.
That's right.
I'll stop there for a while to allow others to ask questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Encik Nordin, for the question. Yeah, anyone else have any questions? Or you can just key into the chat box, or you can just raise your hand. No problem. Just unmute yourself and ask the questions, please. Okay, surprisingly, so silent.
Yeah, no worries. Perhaps if there's no question, maybe I can share with you. What happens when a client engages with us, comes to us to say, we really want to explore automating this process. What happens next? Perhaps maybe I can just walk you through how we go about with a client. So let's just say a client comes to us, they will first share their goal of why they are embarking down this journey. Most of them is because they are required. Because I think that's the first incentive, right? I mean, at the end of the day, economics is key. You must ensure that it's aligned with with your whatever that's coming down your balance sheet. But some of them want to have a goal in really branding themselves, in showcasing how they can be a leader in this space. So what happens next when we engage with a client? First and foremost, you will have a working group assigned to them to go in and really go through their greenhouse gas inventory. What it means is that we really go through and study your organizational structure. We identify areas of where your greenhouse gas emissions are coming from, so that we are able to simplify the data collection process. I mentioned earlier that there are multiple ways for us to get the data. I think a lot of the times in the West, API integration can easily be done because a majority of their climate data resides in their ERP systems, in their accounting systems. However, what we have found out in this part of the world, majority of this climate data, i.e. your fuel consumption, your business, travel, your employee commuting, your purchase group, your CAPEX, your OPEX, all of them resides outside of these systems. So we have come up with a proprietary tool. It is called a climate data collection tool, whereby we're able to really customize the software based on the greenhouse gas inventory that we mentioned earlier into our software. Now, this is for our corporate clients, yeah. So corporate clients here again, when you talk about, really how are they able to benefit from a solution such as ours? Perhaps I can share. One of our clients, they just provide us with feedback. They said, before Pantas, we we were really, struggling. Now we're able to just, with a two-man team, able to really manage this entire operations, and they have large factories with thousands of employees, and only two people manpower are needed to really run that sustainability department. So it just comes to show that when you're able to manage the data, you're able to automate that process in the calculation of that data. Really it takes away the headache, because what we want the sustainability officers here is not to spend their days and nights and weeks to really collect data. What we want them to do is really taking it a step further. Now that we're able to quantify and then showcase where the large carbon intensity areas are from. For example, we're able to identify even to the machine that's emitting the most carbon emissions. And these sustainability officers can now see, learn, and look and action upon the suggestions that we're able to provide for them. So they're able to switch over to...
Shaida,
yes.
Can I stop you there?
Sure.
Now that sounds interesting, simply because you may be suggesting that this particular data collection exercise can be done by just perhaps a couple of people. But I see the most onerous part of this particular exercise will be data collection.
Yes.
Yes. Because it resides outside of your normal ERP. So therefore, you're going to have to search for this data in order to be able to get a more concise collection of data later on. Yes. So how would you then explain with a couple of people and with your help or assistance, this whole exercise can be done, seamlessly, maybe? I'm not sure whether it can be done seamlessly, but how do you explain that?
Sure, that's a fantastic question. So I mentioned earlier the proprietary tool we call the climate data collection tool. So what it does is really we want to encourage a collaborative effort in the data collection process. So what do I mean by that? When we go into an organization, it takes up to 2 months to really identify where the data resides. Now, once that's done, that particular person that's responsible for that data will be given access to the software. And all they need to key in are the data that resides under their control. So for example, we go onto the factory floor to identify the person in charge. They will have access to the software because the way our software works is really not by user. We do not charge by user. What we want to just imagine it as like a Google Drive exercise. You have entire teams working together during a collection period to key in. Some of them just needs to key in 2 items, and all it takes is less than 2 minutes. So the software is really customized. We identify the person in charge. That's the only data they need to include because that's also important to ensure the data quality. And again, within the software, we have AI capabilities to flag any anomalies. What do I mean by that? There's machine learning built in. If there is a large variance from 1 month to the next, the software will also flag and highlight that. And let's just say at the end of the month, you are in the process of getting your data verified. We also have the audit trail feature within the software that's able to show who put in what information, what changes were made, and that will also help them to identify and also rectify any errors that might have been found.
Let me go to very specific detail now because I'm trying really to understand. If you're talking about emission by a particular employee, for example, if I were to drive to work and it takes me, just an example, an hour on the road. Now, do I have to key in that information myself in the system?
So how we have come about to solve that under employee commuting is that under the greenhouse gas protocol, you're able to do a survey. So based on the sample size of the employees, we're able to now see where they live. And then based on that, we can come up with a proxy information estimate on that amount of information. And that's all allowed under the greenhouse gas protocol.
Okay.
That's how we manage that, yes.
All right. Sorry to interrupt.
Not to worry. I think there's also, I mean, the beauty of technology is there's so much you can do with it. We're also exploring working with an HR software that has information on every employee, so they know exactly where they live, and then you know the office space, so we're able to even pull in that data if that's available. So if your HR team has that information, we're able to pull it in, and it's really, I think the beauty here is it can be automated. So that's why for us, we're like, if there is a solution, and this is why it can be done and managed by just a 2-man team, because the work is now being distributed to everyone within the company.
But it may be manageable from the company perspective, your own company perspective. The moment you go stage 3, how do you handle that?
Exactly. So this is why the GVC program was born. So we're talking about GVC program is the Greening Value Chain Program. So in short, it is a supplier management program. So your suppliers, which are your scope 3, will be able to get access to a simplified version of the software for this data collection process. So that's how we're able to get the suppliers on board and also to identify and to get started with the scope 3 calculation. That's how we're able to do that.
A supplier may be supplying to 1,000 or 50,000 clients.
Yes.
Would they therefore be swarmed with 50,000 software that they need to handle?
No. So when you talk about the SME suppliers, their data, at the end of the day, we want to get the suppliers to just get started in the process. So what do I mean by that? We want them to just start small. Within the software, we just need 2 items, which is their scope 1 and scope 2. So this is easy information that's within their control. And there is a download function within the software where they can download their report. And this report can be used anywhere. So they do not have to use more than one software, because it's like your annual check. You have your blood work and your blood report, so you can carry that blood work to any doctor. So it doesn't matter how many different physicians or specialists you want to go to, you already have that information. That information does not change. So a supplier does not have to go and tap into multiple softwares. So they can use that data for any of their buyers.
So you will be sharing your medical report to everyone. Failing which you will not be able to get into the value chain.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the questions. Yeah.
Shaida, you mentioned something about it's very cost efficient, but how much would it cost to take on your platform? I mean, how do you charge to the customers? Is it on a subscription basis? How do you and you know, do you charge according to revenues? You know, and or profit? How would you you know, if a customer were to approach you, how would you charge them?
That's a fantastic question. So it is a SaaS, so we operate under SaaS, so software as a service. We have an annual subscription, so it is a minimum of 12-month subscription. I'm not able to share the price point right now. I think, but if someone is interested, can definitely tap me. The way we decide a price point is really in terms of the number of business units, because that translates to the amount of data that we're talking about, the scope of work. So they can, what we provide again is an end-to-end. So we assist them in their data collection, the calculation of their scope 1, 2, and 3. We provide them advisory, training as well, and then also assistance if they want to embark onto the reporting for SBTI or CDP, or even come up with different solutions to their business problem, i.e., let's just say, for example, Datai wants to be a climate positive hotel, for example. So those are the type of work that we provide. In terms of the pricing point, I would like to share. I'm very happy that we are very competitive in the market. I am not able to share right now because I think it's unfair. It really is based on the industry and the business units, the amount of business units. But it is the most competitive one in this region. So that I'm happy to share.
Alex, it has got
Yeah.
to be multiple times over and above what she's getting now as a hedge fund manager or private equity person.
No, it is not true. It is funny. People will say, Shaida, are you crazy? Why did you switch over from a hedge fund job to climate? I feel like, you know, at some point when you're looking at your children and then you have parents who are so passionate about saving the planet, and then the temperature is rising, and you read all these IPCC reports, you watch all these movies, you're like, it has to be me. Like, you know, and so I'm a startup founder. So, you know, the pay is definitely as a startup founder. So
Okay.
the cost will definitely be paying my amazing team at Pantas, who's, you know, working tirelessly to really come up with this pioneering, you know, game-changing technology.
Okay, that's wonderful. You mentioned something. Your software is powered by AI. Would it help to write? Would it also help in writing out the ESG reports that you see in an annual report?
Oh yes, absolutely. I like to share that we have incorporated a ChatGPT-like function within our software in the dashboard itself. You're able to type in just like you do in ChatGPT. For example, what are my scope 3 emissions for this particular month? We're also able to very soon, in the next couple of weeks, incorporate that so that you no longer need to write your sustainability reports. We use all the data, the graphs, and the measurements, and it will be incorporated automatically within your sustainability report that will be produced by the software, and all you need to do is just verify and go through that. So yes, that is some of the exciting features that we have.
I would have thought that you would go to that route, the ChatGPT route. Yeah.
Yes. So we are very excited that we've launched that. So a lot of our clients are very excited about this new feature as well.
Yeah, wonderful.
All right. And also in terms of the verification of the data, I know auditors are beginning to look into this. You know, in order to verify that whatever numbers that is being churned out is accurate, how would the auditing process work with you in this area?
Sure. So some of the feature that we have is really providing an assurance ready report. Reason why in this space there's no verification. It is called assurance, limited assurance. So the report that we produce is really to simplify the process of assuring the calculation, because under the assurance ready report, by line item, we're able to even provide the backup of the emission factor and then the source of it directly. So recently, as I mentioned, BSI came in to really verify, to assure our process and our calculations, and they said that really cut down their time in assuring from 2 weeks on average to 2 days. So that just comes to show how fast it is, because we're able to really easily provide the backup for those data points.
That's really wonderful. Yeah. Any questions from the floor? We are coming towards the end of our 1 hour milestone. So any further questions from the floor?
Alex, if there's no one else, I will ask one
Go,
question,
please,
but
please.
I will allow
Yeah,
others
go ahead.
to ask.
Sure, go ahead.
Shaida, you mentioned about data earlier. Now, interestingly, I sit on the board of a plantation company and also on the board of solar panel manufacturer. How do they start? Do they start with going back to data example? You mentioned that data started off with an objective, a mission about their carbon strategy, etc., carbon objective, etc. Is that how they should start off? And give me an example of a company, say, dealing with the oil palm plantation. What do they have to do to start the thought process going?
Sure, absolutely. I think for the most part, if they are a public listed company, we must understand that they are being required by Bursa to start disclosing their carbon emissions. And also for a company, I think really to look at what are the requirements coming through your pipe, and let's to see if you have an objective to position yourself as a leader in this space. I think that's also another way you can embark on that journey. I think for us, we have clients that really come to us really wanting to make an impact. So they said, hey, in our industry, we really emit a lot of carbon. How can we go about this really? And we want to be accountable for the carbon emissions into the atmosphere. So I think it has to come from management. As I said earlier, top-down approach is always most effective. And I think it has to come as a collective decision by the management. I think that's how we've seen it being effective, for our clients.
I have a friend who is a co-supplier, a major co-supplier. How how would he benefit from this?
Oh boy. I think that's a conversation. I think, as we know, coal is one of the leading contributors to the GHG emissions. So I think perhaps switching over to a renewable energy business. I think just to show what Pertamina is doing right now, they're really going into the renewable energy. For example, the Pertamina geothermal. So I think looking into the alternative and starting on that process, that's one of the ways that we've seen coal companies, continue to remain competitive. So just really looking into the renewable energy space. It's not going to stop. I think it's only going to get bigger.
All right, that's it. Cukup.
Okay.
Cukup.
All right.
Alex.
Thank you so much, Encik Nordin. Really, it's been wonderful, your questions. And also thank you so much, Shaida. It's a fantastic presentation by you. And I'm sure there will be some inquiries later from some of our clients regarding your platform. And you've sent me the link and I will send it. I'll forward to them upon request. Yes?
Yes, absolutely. If anything, we can also be found at pantas.com. I think on the website there's also a link to request for a demo. But if anything, I will just also share my email address here. So please feel free to email me directly to schedule. I will be more than happy to personally walk you through the software and all the ChatGPT like features that I mentioned earlier. So I just shared here in the chat box.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank
you so much. All right. Have a
Thank
great
you.
weekend, and well, I wish you all the best in your startup. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you for the support. Thank you. All right.
Okay. Thank
Assalamualaikum
you.
warahmatullahi
Okay.
Salam.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you.